Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. Tonight we're going to be talking about voting rights. So with us tonight is Thaddeus Polhamus, Merrick Moses, Marilee Rendulich. Welcome all. The two most sacred documents to the founding of this nation are the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. School children memorize key phrases such as, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Thomas Jefferson really didn't believe these words extended to any men of African descent. But this phrase was convenient to use for the rest of the document, which listed all the grievances white men of property held against oppressive taxes that King George and Parliament tried to impose on those poor plantation-owning slaveholders. Many school children may also remember another catchy phrase in the preamble of the Constitution: "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." The misnomer here is the use of the word people, which included white men, but excluded women and all people of color. The mythologies associated with these documents has led to a special reverence for the founding fathers who held the power in establishing the framework by which this republic operates. This sacred reverence has endured throughout our history. But is it not finally the time to publicly expose the flaws in both documents and the white men of privilege who crafted them? Is it unpatriotic to say these guys made some mistakes? Merrick, what do you think about that?
1,000, 2,000%. But see, this is also the issue, right? I think that part of our national trauma is because we've never really had cogent, hard-hitting discussions about slavery and the disenfranchisement of women, the genocide of indigenous folks. People get real nervous in talking about that. And for some reason, some people feel shame or whatever. And I think that that's something that people should learn how to deal with. That being said, part of our challenge as a nation is to really understand our history. And we are in danger of not just misunderstanding our history, but propagandizing it and ultimately creating a civic religion. Because when you turn the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence into some quasi-religious documents, as some of our evangelical friends like to do, they were inspired by God. What you're literally saying is that everything in that document was not only inspired by God, but approved by God. And we know that that is not true. And it creates a national mythos with a side of divine blessing. And that's dangerous and is very nationalistic. And if we don't correct this, there will be generations of Americans who will be totally lost and have no idea what the actual history of the nation is. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
When you say if we don't correct this, are you saying that we need to correct our perception of the deification of these guys? Or what do we need to correct?
We need to teach that the founding fathers were real people with real problems, with real contradictions, and that's fine. I think when we look at Hamilton, the play, which I saw on TV, it was fabulous. Hamilton was a genius, but he had some really big flaws, and that's fine, and that's okay. But giving these people civic sainthood is not going to do anything for anybody. In fact, it does not allow us to fully embrace their ideals because we're only getting half of who they are, even a third. We love Thomas Jefferson, but he started sexually assaulting his African American mistress when she was like 16 years old. He was a grown man. So, we have to understand them also in context as well. And we rob ourselves of the joys of discovering that if we want to make them saints and demigods.
Okay, Marilee, do you see our reverence towards these founding fathers, these founding documents, as a problem in how we face society today?
Tangentially, we've always learned about slave ownership, but we've never really dug into the true foundation of our democracy. So yes, if we're going to have any truth to how we were born as a democracy, then we need to see that all people weren't created equally in the minds of the founding fathers, and that it took a number of amendments, but it did take some realization. Certain, these things did happen to pass. Of course, it took a couple centuries. So I don't know why we're so afraid of it. I just don't understand it. We've carried this through centuries now, and it doesn't add up. I can't grasp why we can't be honest with ourselves.
Thaddeus, sacred reverence for these guys and what they wrote down, put in the document. Is that helpful or harmful to what we're living through now?
Well, sacred reverence is good enough up to about the third grade. And beyond that, everybody has to start learning the reality of the history. And I will say, I think that we're being a little hyperbolic about saying that we think that, the words of the Constitution are sacred and written in stone and can never be changed, et cetera, because the history of the making of those documents includes hours and days of people arguing about slavery. And there were people who were signing those documents who were saying, I am holding my nose and signing this because we have not abolished slavery in this country. And it would be, another 70 years and a war before they did. And of course, as we find out from the history after that, slavery was abolished in name only. We got sharecroppers, and then we got Jim Crow, and then then we got the Voting Rights Act in 1964, and all the white people thought, oh, we got it licked, we fixed that problem. And now 50 years later, we've got 19 states that have new laws that are rolling back voting rights for people of color, especially. So, that's one side of it. The other side, of course, is the women's suffrage, and people were aware that that was a shortcoming quite a long time ago. And after 100 years of fighting, women finally got the vote, and at least for the first 100 years of women's suffrage, there hasn't been a major effort to roll that back. Knock wood, can't say that it's not ever going to happen, because the United States is full of human beings and we're all flawed. We are here to form a more perfect union, not we are a perfect union and we're going to somehow improve on perfection. The idea, I think, that they all knew, all the people who signed those documents knew at the time that what they were signing was and should remain a work in progress as long as there's a United States. So we're working on it. We have an awful lot more to do. So we can't just sit back and say, hey, we're good. But
or say that the founding fathers were geniuses and we just need to go with what they said.
No, no, can't agree with that.
Okay.
They weren't geniuses, but a lot of the wording in there indicates that they knew they weren't geniuses. They say, here, start with this. That's what the Constitution tells us. These are these are laws that we can start with. We'll have to move on from that. And we got, what, 28 amendments so far? And they
Something
may
like
not
that.
be all
Yeah.
that might not be all we need. We might need a few more. So we keep working on it.
Okay. Okay. Prior to the 2020 election, Trump was warning the American people, which essentially said that if he didn't win, the election was rigged. Local election officials across the country took this warning very seriously and imposed extraordinary measures to prevent any mishaps or irregularities from occurring with the voting or the counting. In Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, where I work as a poll worker, we have a great system where the voters fill out a paper ballot, which they send through a scanner that counts the votes electronically. That way, the votes are tabulated immediately, and there is also a paper trail in case there are any complaints about the scanner machine. But I digress. In spite of the fact that all these election officials took such great care in processing legitimate votes, Trump's losing the election resulted in widespread allegations that the election was rigged. In every swing state, Trump lost. Now we have what Thaddeus referred to earlier as election integrity laws sweeping the country in Republican-controlled state legislatures. My question is, had Trump won instead of losing in 2020, would there have been the same onslaught of election integrity laws that we've seen since the election? Thaddeus, would these state legislators have gone through all this rigmarole if Trump won?
Of course not. But what Trump was really saying, when he was threatening the country, saying, if I lose, it's because it's rigged. What he was saying is, if I lose, don't trust your election, no matter what. And he has pushed that agenda for, a year and a half out after that election happened and he lost, by mounting however many recounts, a couple of these bogus, what do you call it? Audits, thank you. And 60 lawsuits in which either Trump or the people following him produced no evidence of any kind. So basically, what it all rolls back to is Donald Trump is telling the country, believe what I say. Do not believe your eyes or your ears, believe what I say, and everyone else is lying. And at least to me, that's the easiest way to tell somebody is a liar, when they say something that's different from what everybody else in the world says, but they say, believe me, because the whole world is lying to you. So what needs to be done to correct this is to change the minds of several tens of millions of people who are kind of like in his cult, to not accept his fact-free complaints.
Well, we've already talked about how hard it is to do that. So, Merrill Lee, do you think all these laws would have shown on the books in these Republican state legislatures had Trump won the election?
I do believe that Trump's impact on our elections there has been some significant erosion of trust. I agree that had he won, it certainly wouldn't be as pervasive. But I look at Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, some of these states have still consistently questioned their own elections, and it's really sad. But Georgia in particular, when the Democrats won both Senate seats, seems to raise the ire of their Republican administration. And I do believe that because he had already implanted this massive lie about our elections, that it still could have had a foothold, and it still could have altered how some of these states went forth and may have done exactly what they're doing now, trying to suppress votes.
Just not to the extent that if he would have won.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that initially, that it wouldn't have been as pervasive if
if he had won, I don't think it would have been as bad, but I think he already eroded enough trust. The things that people say and question about the elections is really absurd. And I don't know that would have actually abated if he had won. I think it's, would have not have been as bad. But
so the lie was planted. It stuck in the minds of enough people that regardless of how the outcome of that particular election, it's still stuck there.
Yes.
Okay. Merrick, do you think there would have been as much of this legislation passed had Trump won?
Absolutely not. I think that what really shook the Republicans was the overwhelming response of voters of color and women. And because they literally have no platform, remember now, they had no platform in 2020. Their platform was what? Trump. That was their whole platform. The reason why Mr. Orange kept saying that the vote was rigged was because he knew he was going to lose. He knew it. He knew it. I believe that he knew it. I believe that his campaign apparatus told him your poll numbers look bad. When he lost to suburban women with all his weird antics and all of that stuff, it really soured people. He just could not comprehend that his antics were going to get him kicked out. However, he felt that there was a great possibility that he would lose. And so when that actually happened, I mean, they have testimony from people from that testified in front of the 1-6 committee that Trump knew that he had lost the election. After the election, he was told by multiple people that he lost. So he decided to concoct all of this BS, and he literally tried to throw the United States government. I don't even know why this person's not in jail.
Well, we talked about that before too. There is a ton of evidence already uncovered by the press, the 1-6 committee, and scores of court filings by Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and other Trump attorneys that Trump was and continues to be unwilling to accept that he lost. Recently, there was a special election held for an open congressional seat in a district that has a 5-to-1 Democratic advantage in voter registration. When the vote was tallied, the Democratic candidate got 80% of the vote, which makes sense. It's a 5-to-1 advantage, while the Republican only got 19%. However, the Republican refused to concede, claiming the election was rigged. Is this what is in store for America's electoral future? Are we going to have this every election now, Merrick?
100,000%. They've taken his playbook. What I think is really weird is how all of these most of these GOP candidates have really adopted his mindset. And they know this is wrong. They do. They know it's wrong. But they feel that they have to go along with this because that's what the voters want. At the end of the day, it is kind of like throwing a smoke bomb into a classroom, right? People won't want to participate because it's so much trouble and they're over it. They're just over it, and people don't like politics. I think that it's not a good look, and it's not a good sign for the future.
Okay, Marilee, do you think that the Republicans are going to be willing to concede elections even when they lose?
Those that do are actually old school now, aren't they? That seems to be the new world order for the GOP. It's just full of balderdash, and it's sad, so undignified. But they don't seem to have any qualms about presenting themselves in that kind of a framework. And yeah, I do see it as an erosion of our democracy if they're not conceding. There's, it's just something unhinged about it that I can't quite wrap my head around. It's kind of like it's like a rotting tentacle of our democracy that's happening. And I don't know how far it's going to go, but it's truly a sign of the impact that Trump has had on his people, and it's affected everybody nationwide. So,
Thaddeus, how far do you think this is going to go?
I have hopes. I'm not going to say that I am certain of this, but I have hopes that as the interminable inquiries and court cases about 1/6 go on, and more people are convicted, and also as Donald Trump's legal trouble seems to multiply a little bit more every week, that eventually it's going to sink in on some candidates that refusing to concede is not going to change the outcome of their election. It only makes them and their party look bad. So this is going to go on for a while, but I don't think that it is a permanent change. This is not something that's going to happen every time there's an election from now until forever. I really think that this is an aberration that started with Donald Trump, this guy who refused to concede over an 80% deficit is really another aberration. He was just a copycat for Donald Trump, and as far as I know, they didn't change the outcome of the election in his favor.
Right, they certified the Democrat as the winner.
Yeah, so when other candidates realize that this is probably what's going to happen, even when the people who are certifying the election for the other guy are themselves Republicans sometimes. It's not going to be total party solidarity when the choice for the people counting the votes is, are you going to be honest or are you going to be dishonest? And if you're going to be dishonest, you're going to face the voters yourself. So I say high hopes that this is going to eventually blow over. The next couple of years going to be rocky.
Just a fad that's going to fade away.
I hope so.
Okay, me too. There are two phrases we hear a lot that are diametrically in opposition: voter suppression versus election integrity. Eliminating the number of polling places, drop boxes, mail-in ballots during a pandemic, and making it a criminal offense to hand a voter standing in line in the hot Georgian sun on election day a drink of water represents election integrity to the lawmakers who pass these laws. Can you explain how these measures safeguard the electoral process? If not, then would you say these measures fall into the category of voter suppression? Thaddeus, how can anyone say this is election integrity? Do you have that logic worked out in your head?
Well, I think that the Republican operatives have the logic worked out in their heads, and that is that they are all fully aware of the disingenuity of what they're saying. This has nothing to do with election integrity. This has nothing to do with safeguarding elections. This has more to do with safeguarding wins for the GOP. And it's sad because the Republicans who are running for office seem to be promising platforms that promise harm and not promote promotion of the public good. So people are not going to be naturally inclined to vote for them. That's why they aren't winning elections. But they seem to think that it's easier, I guess, to keep people from voting than it is to offer the people who are going to vote something to vote for. So election integrity, it is not. That's a misnomer. It is voter suppression in whole cloth. And they're not doing anything to protect elections, except protect them from Democrats winning.
So would you call this cheating then? Cheating to win?
Absolutely, 100%. They can't
Okay.
win honestly, so cheat to win.
All right, Merrick, cheating to win. Is that what is going on here with these election integrity laws?
When I hear the term election integrity, I just hear Jim Crow 2.0. This is clearly a way to slow down the growing numbers of voters of color, young people, LGBTQ people, and women from voting. This is what all of that is about. And we just need to call a spade a spade. The fact that you can't give somebody a bottle of water online is ridiculous. And remember now, a lot of these people that are sponsoring these measures and promoting these measures claim they're Christians. So, we really need to think about that. Why are they so afraid of people voting? And then other thing too, they wouldn't have anything to be afraid of if they actually had a for real platform. Like if they had actual solutions to the problems that everyday folks face, they wouldn't be going through this because they have chosen to go with the black hole that is Mr. Orange. They have nothing to offer anybody, nothing at all.
Yeah, I kind of think sometimes Republican platform is let me make your life as miserable as I can so we can blame that on the Democrats.
Yes.
Okay, Mary Lee, is there any way that you can construe what is going on in these state legislatures to support the notion that it has anything to do with election integrity?
No, I think it's just a name that they've applied to their own efforts to suppress the vote. Clearly they were frazzled by the turnout. However, they did remarkably well, and they don't seem to acknowledge their own down ballot successes, particularly with Congress, which is also hard for me to grasp.
Let me follow you up on that one, because what you say is very true, that they did have a lot of down ballot success. And is it possible that all these laws that they're passing could end up suppressing the vote that gave them that success? Is that what you're leading up to?
I'm not, I can't address that universally because I don't know exactly how these states are specifically enacting certain laws. But from what I know, from what Stacey Abrams has said about Georgia, I mean, they are literally putting ballot boxes in certain precincts. I mean, they're limiting access. And I think that actually affects the elderly, and it probably disenfranchises our youth from voting. But it's hard for me to say exactly how everybody's going to be impacted by it. But given that it's a GOP, I think we can generally say it's biased in favor,
they have a pattern
of white people. Yeah. But if you look historically at the mail-in voting, that has always been a Republican stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
When the pandemic came and mail-in balloting became a safe way to have an election for public health reasons, and we had this significant turnout, now they see it as a cross to bear. And it's just striking to me because they always were a front runner in mail-in ballot turnout. So
Cut off their nose to spite their face.
exactly. You know, it's just in certain respects, but they're also elevating this whole animosity towards our election system, which I find absolutely egregious.